So today I want to say something about the Science Museum of the Vedic Planetarium as a heritage project. And this is based on a paper that I presented at the World Archaeological Congress meeting in 2022 at Prague in the Czech Republic. So generally, archaeology deals with the past. Archaeologists collect artifacts and identify structures from the past, and this becomes part of heritage. Many archaeologists today are very much connected with heritage management, and in that sense, their perspective is directed towards the future, what we're going to pass on from our generation to future generations. And heritage exists in both tangible and intangible forms. Tangible form would be, for example, stone monuments. Intangible heritage would be ideas about cosmology. So we can take the Science Museum of the Vedic Planetarium as a case study in transmitting and indigenous traditions and tangible cultural heritage to the future. And the tradition we're speaking about is Gaudiya Vaishnavism. The main personality connected with that tradition is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who appeared in 1486 in Mayapur, West Bengal. And the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition very much stresses the importance of studying the Bhagavat Purana or Srimad Bhagavatam, which itself begins with a meeting of sages in the Naimisharanya forest who are discussing what aspects of their Vedic heritage were most important to pass on to coming generations in the Kali Yuga, which they could see would be a time of troubles and disturbances. So they decided that among the ideas that should be passed on were ideas about cosmology. Now, this tradition was for a long time the property of Gaudiya Vaishnavas in India. But beginning in 1965, this cultural tradition, this knowledge was globalized on a wide scale by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada through his International Society for Krishna Consciousness. And part of his globalizing project for the Vedic cosmology was the idea of constructing in Mayapur the Temple of Vedic Planetarium. And he conceived it as providing a model depicting the planetary systems as described in the fifth canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. But he also contemplated that there would be museum-like exhibits explaining different aspects of the Vedic cosmology. So that is the mission of the Science Museum of the Vedic Planetarium. It will occupy the west wing of the Temple of Vedic Planetarium. You see there on the left that there will be 4 floors of exhibits, which will be opened in various stages, beginning with the first, second, and third floors, and then the fourth floor and the ground floor. The ground floor is not really suitable for exhibits, so it will be used for support facilities and educational facilities, meeting rooms, reading rooms, and so on. Now, on in the museum exhibits themselves on the first, second, third, and fourth floors, the idea will to be to answer certain fundamental questions that arise when people contemplate the cosmos. The first being, who am I in this cosmos? If we don't have a proper understanding of who we are, we can't act in our own best self-interest. If we don't know the proper identity of others, we can't really act in their own interest. We should also understand, where am I in the cosmos? And finally, where should I be going? So, in order to answer these questions, it's necessary to examine questions of how we acquire knowledge. In the Vedic epistemology, there are different kinds of evidence: the sense evidence, the conclusions arrived at by inferences, logical inferences from sense evidence, and finally the Shabda Pramana, evidence from trusted, reliable sources in the form of sound vibration, which is recorded in the Vedic literature, including the Puranas, the cosmological writings. So there'll be exhibits on that. Now, the question of who am I, we want to communicate the idea that we are not simply machines made of molecules, that there are other aspects to our identity as conscious, individual, personal beings. These are summarized in the Vedanta as aham brahmasmi. I am an eternally existing, individual, personal, conscious self. And that self is now connected with a material body existing in gross and subtle forms. And we want to communicate the idea that this embodiment that we currently have is not the whole story, that the soul journeys through different types of bodies in a process of spiritual evolution. We want to provide exhibits where, using the latest technologies, that will allow people to gain some insight and experience of what it's like to exist in different kinds of bodies in this process of the evolution of the soul through different species. One advantage of understanding the spiritual nature of the self is that it can help us arise above the conflicts that result from superficial identification with the gross and subtle material bodies, for example, in the form of nationalism or racism or different self-concepts that don't really reflect the true idea. And this also allows one to perceive not only the oneness of all the conscious selves in human forms, but in every form of life. So it engenders an outlook that is conducive to world peace and understanding and environmental harmony. So then the question arises, well, where are we in the cosmos? We learned that the material cosmos is only a small part of a larger cosmos that includes the spiritual worlds. And we learned that our universe is one of many that emanate from Mahavishnu, and this has some parallels in the modern concept of the multiverse. So our universe is something like a virtual reality system that is uh, meant meant for souls who aren't yet qualified to exist on the spiritual level of reality, where their features of eternality, knowledge, and bliss can be fully expressed. They can't be fully expressed on our current level of reality. So we want to have exhibits based on scientific principles and Vedic philosophy that communicate these ideas to a wide audience. So the material cosmos is just part of the whole picture, but it's important to recognize that it is also the energy of God. It's an actual form of God, the universal form. And if we appreciate that, it'll give a different concept of civilization. Our main purpose is not to dominate, control, and exploit the resources of material nature to the maximum extent. Rather, our purpose is to satisfy our material needs in the most simple, natural, and efficient way possible, while putting most of our human energy into the elevation of consciousness and qualifying ourselves to exist on the level where all of the features of our conscious individual self can be fully expressed in relationship to the supreme conscious self, Krishna. And for that purpose, in the central dome of the Temple of Vedic Planetarium will be a chandelier model of the Vedic planetary systems going all the way through the different material levels of the cosmos to the spiritual levels and the ultimate uh, spiritual planet, Goloka Vrindavan. So actually, the fourth floor or fourth level of the Temple of Vedic Planetarium will be dedicated to depicting the position of liberated souls in the spiritual sky. There's a big dome up there which lends itself to either a 360-degree dome theater or other types of digital display that will give people a wow experience of what awaits them if they make the journey all the way up to go there. So that's what we ultimately want to communicate to people. The Temple of Vedic Planetarium has a working agreement with the Bhaktivedanta Institute of Higher Studies, which has connections with other Bhaktivedanta Institute groups and related groups like ISS throughout the world. And we want to make sure that our presentation is not only faithful to our Vedic Gaudiya Vaishnava sources, but is also scientifically accurate. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much yourself, Dudikar. That was an excellent summary of the Science Museum. I think you explained its purposes, its outlook, its value, and many of the details that we have. There is one question. I don't know if you'd like to take it. We have a moment to do it. It says, when we assert that the material cosmos constitutes only a fraction of the entire cosmos, we face the challenge of conceptualizing this notion, especially since the term fractional inherently pertains to the space-time continuum. This implies that space comparisons are relative within the material cosmos. Therefore, what is the context for such a comparison?
The context is that whatever we perceive on this level of reality is a reflection of a spiritual reality, but it's a perverted reflection. The time factor in the material cosmos has a destructive aspect to it. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Kalosmi Lokachaya Krit, time I am, destroyer of the worlds. This indicates that time operating within the material cosmos is of the nature of, it has a directionality to it, and it's a problem that confronts scientists trying to understand how the material cosmos functions. There seems to be a directionality of time that is related to increasing entropy. In other words, increasing disorganization. So that factor is there. That aspect of time is not present in the spiritual dimension. It is there is an order. There are pastimes. Things do happen in a certain sequence, but that destructive aspect of the time factor is absent. In terms of spatial representation, that is what we experience in this world is there is a space in which the activities of the time factor can be expressed, which are pushing things in a certain direction. But that type of spatial arrangement is not there in the spiritual world. Of course, this I don't claim myself to have the answer to every question. One concept that we have for the Temple of Vedic Planetarium Science Museum is it will incorporate an ongoing, it will feature ongoing research on different philosophical and scientific questions related to the Vedic cosmology. So I can say myself that I haven't fully thought through all the aspects of the differences or similarities between spatial representation in the material cosmos as it relates to the spiritual aspect of the cosmos, which is different in many ways.
Okay, thank you very much.